phone calls for the previous owner, who turned out to be my terrible manager. This is going to be a long one, so bear with me. You might also think this belongs in the 80s subreddit. Let me know what you think. Names have been changed for anonymity. Mobile phones became common in my country around 2004, just as I finished high school. My parents bought me my first phone, a second-hand Nokia. It was bulky and basic, but I promised myself that one day I'd buy a new phone with my own money. When college started, I had a 2-hour daily commute. I had excelled in high school and won several district-level awards. During my first year of college, I received a nationalized bank award that finally gave me enough money to buy a new phone. I chose a Sony Ericsson 3 Hulleye along with a premium SIM card, not realizing it had been abandoned by its previous owner. By the third day, I started receiving calls for a guy named Bitsa from various financial institutions. It turned out that the number previously belonged to him, and for 20 years, I've been getting these calls. Determined to keep my premium number, I began a routine of blocking the wrong numbers. Back then, blocking was device-specific, so each time I got a new phone, I had to start over, keeping a list of numbers to block. I landed my first job after graduating in 2009. Around 2010, I was assigned to a new project that had a notorious reputation for burning people out, all thanks to a dreadful project manager named Bits. I didn't know his full name for a while, but he took pride in making our lives a living hell. Bits ruled with an iron fist. From the moment his team stepped into the office, they were met with a barrage of emails and messages, each more urgent than the last. He thrived on chaos, often changing project deadlines on a whim and demanding his team work late into the night and through weekends. His presence loomed over every task. He insisted on micromanaging every detail while being quick to take credit for any successes, no matter how small. Failures, however, were met with his notorious tirades, as he publicly berated his team and assigned blame without hesitation. His unpredictable temper kept everyone on edge, afraid to make even the slightest mistake. Meetings were another tool in his arsenal of torment. He scheduled them during lunch breaks and after hours, ensuring no one could escape his grasp. These meetings were often pointless, serving only to reinforce his dominance and disrupt any semblance of work-life balance his team might have had. His relentless stream of emails continued around the clock, each carrying a thinly veiled threat, perfection, or dismissal. Under his reign, morale plummeted and burnout soared. Yet Bits remained oblivious, satisfied only by his complete and total control. I was ashamed to learn he was from the same area as I was and had gone to the same school, albeit years before me. In 2012, our company merged with a parent company. Almost nothing changed personnel-wise, but infrastructure-wise, we got MS Outlook and an organizational view. That was when I first learned about Bits from an organizational hierarchy perspective. His full name was an eye-opener. It was Bitsa. Now, the name was common enough, but at the time, mobile numbers had an area-specific pattern, so I already knew the previous owner of my number was from the same area as me. Still, it could have been someone else. I wanted to dig deeper. I talked with an old mentor who lived in the same area and had coached several high school students for the last 2 decades. He confirmed my suspicions. I won't go into detail, but it was evident that Bitsa and Bits were the same person. I had been quite annoyed with this unknown person named Bitsa for almost a decade, and Bits had been the bane of my sen and several others' existence for quite some time. This is where my revenge comes in. First, I unblocked all the numbers in my phone. I was getting 5-6 calls daily on average, but after unblocking about 150 numbers, that number skyrocketed to 15-18. My answering strategy changed drastically. Instead of saying, "wrong number," I politely explained that the owner had changed his number and provided the correct number for their database. I might have been the AH here because I also volunteered his manager's number in case he tried something else. The fallout was epic. These people had been trying to track him down for almost a decade. Banks had sold his debts to companies that harassed people for a living to get their money back. It turned out he had been taking loans in everyone's names, so his wife, parents, uncles, aunts, and giving them all the same number. He was evading credit card debt and loans totaling over 200K, a significant amount where I'm from. Apparently, he had almost 20 cases filed against him, but no one could find him. It's likely why he thought he could get away with anything. There are multiple versions of what happened at the office when his manager started getting calls about him. He was let go about 2 months later, and I haven't heard from him since. The previous owner of my number, duped several financial institutions and later turned out to be my terrible boss. I informed the banks of his new number and his manager's number, leaving his career in shambles. Fired from my job, but scored a year's pay and got my boss fired back in the early 2010s, before video editing and content creation tech became what it is today. I landed a job at a university as a content creator. They wanted to jumpstart their brand using YouTube, and though the pay was only around $200, I accepted because jobs in video content were scarce. However, I quickly learned that this gig was going to be a nightmare. On my second day, my manager presented my KPI: create 85 videos, each 3 10 minutes long in just 52 weeks. For a one-person team in those days, this was next to impossible. I would have to handle everything: scripting, producing, casting, filming, music composition if they were too cheap to pay for royalty-free music, and editing. Using my own equipment, since theirs couldn't even handle basic HD quality. I flagged these issues with my manager, but she just gave me an encouraging smile and said, "Just focus on quality, the numbers won't be a priority if the work is good." Reassured, I agreed to give it a go. At first, she seemed supportive, but her attitude shifted after she found out I smoked. A colleague later told me that my manager despised smokers and had a track record of trying to fire them. From that point on, she was constantly on my case, nitpicking over things like the faintest hint of cigarette smoke, my arrival a few minutes late, despite the 60 put hours I worked weekly, or even me taking breaks. Still, I kept at it, determined to do a good job. About 5 months in, I was called to the director's office, where I saw my manager looking particularly pleased. My stomach dropped. The director explained that she was disappointed with my progress, noting that I'd only completed 30 videos out of the 85 required. I tried to explain that I was working nearly 7 days a week and doing everything alone, and that the videos I'd completed had generated the highest engagement the university had ever seen on YouTube. I reminded them that my manager herself had emphasized quality over quantity. But the director dismissed my points, saying the KPI was simple: 85 videos in 1 year. They told me they were cutting the cord early. When I asked how they planned to meet the KPI without me, my manager smugly announced, "We'll hire a professional production house to finish the job." The director gave her an odd look but still nodded in agreement, saying, "Don't worry, manager will get the job done." That's when I had an idea. Part of my role involved keeping a database of production houses for larger projects, so I knew my manager would rely on it once I left. Before I went, I changed the contact details for every entry except one: production house where a friend of mine was a junior director. I gave my friend a heads up explaining my plan, and sure enough, within a couple of days, his company was called in to pitch. I offered to guide him through the pitch process and proposed a deal: his company would pay me a 15% finder's fee in exchange for my insider knowledge. He agreed and even got his general manager on board, who saw the potential high 6-figure payout and promptly drafted a contract. With the step-by-step guidance I gave them, my friend's company asked the pitch. They understood the university's needs perfectly, down to the themes and style they wanted. The director and my ex-manager were so impressed they signed them up immediately. But here's the kicker: using a professional production house wasn't cheap. Each video they produced would cost 2 to 3 times my monthly salary, as their team had dedicated professionals for every role: director, producer, sound technician, editor, and more. While this meant they could finish a video in a few days, the costs piled up fast. In the end, my friend's production house completed the remaining 50 videos in 4 months, but at a cost that exceeded 100 times my monthly salary. Meanwhile, I enjoyed a 15% cut of the total project budget, equivalent to 15 months of my pay. This windfall allowed me to save for a vacation and even fund film school overseas. I thought that was the end of my revenge story, until I got a call while on vacation in Bali. The caller was a colleague who had once warned me about my manager's anti-smoking attitude. She told me that my former manager had been fired and the director had been severely reprimanded. Apparently, the content creation project I'd been hired for had only been budgeted for about 1.5 times my yearly salary, but my manager's rush to complete it at all costs had led them to exceed the budget by over tenfold. In her desperation to impress the director, my manager had authorized these massive expenses without approval, which ended up backfiring. In the end, I got my friend a fast-track promotion to director at his company, a year's pay for myself, and some much-deserved karma for my former manager. Operation Let It Got: A Holiday Tale of Nepotism, Engineers, and Frozen Justice. This story comes from my dad about my late Uncle Dale, a lifelong engineer and instructor at a small firm in the Midwest, who always found clever solutions for life's little problems. In his memory, and in the spirit of the upcoming holidays, I give you the story of how he turned a case of theft into a legendary engineering prank, all set to the sounds of Idina Menzel's Let It Go. Uncle Dale was known around the office as the guy who made things happen, especially when it came to office parties. To help cover the party expenses, he had a small tin box outside his office door for donations. Colleagues were happy to chip in, at least until one December day when Uncle Dale checked the box and found it completely empty. He knew he'd seen people drop in cash, so someone must have been taking it. It didn't take him long to suspect who might be the culprit. Brad, the owner's nephew, came around the corner right then, looking a bit too shifty. Brad wasn't exactly the office favorite. He was arrogant, obnoxious, and well aware that his family connection meant he could get away with just about anything. No one liked him, and his entitled attitude only made things worse. Uncle Dale had a hunch but knew he needed proof. Being the inventive type, he decided to set a trap. He rigged a doorbell camera above the donation box, then had a colleague make a loud show of donating $100. It wasn't long before he got the notification he'd been waiting for. Sure enough, Brad opened the box, found nothing inside, and slammed it against the wall in frustration. With evidence in hand, most people might have gone straight to the boss. But Uncle Dale had a more entertaining plan in mind. He went to his engineering students, offering extra credit to whoever could design a rigged box that would play an obnoxiously loud tune when opened. The more over top the noise, the bigger the bonus. 1 week later, his students presented him with their masterpiece. They'd installed a music insert from a singing greeting card that blasted Frozen's Let It Go. The song everyone was starting to hate by then. They'd made sure it played at max volume and added a twist once the box was opened. It wouldn't close until you found a hidden button. Just to be thorough, they glued the insert down with industrial strength adhesive. The next day, Uncle Dale announced, "Well, someone left a Darcy in the party fund," and waited. It wasn't long before the office was filled with the unmistakable sound of Idina Menzel's voice, along with the unmistakable sounds of Brad's frustration. Everyone came out to watch Brad wrestling with the box. Finally, in a fit of rage, he hurled it at the wall, leaving a dent that attracted his uncle's attention. The boss called Brad into his office, and 15 minutes later, Brad was packing up his desk with a stern note in his file: "Do not rehire. Do not recommend." Just like that, Brad's career in engineering was over. At the Christmas party, Uncle Dale had one last treat for everyone. He played the doorbell cam footage of Brad's epic failure, complete with Let It Go as the soundtrack. It was a perfect mix of holiday cheer, engineer ingenuity, and sweet, sweet justice.